of what we want to make sure we're doing this building is also building skills and capacity around care coordination. So we're exploring the idea of having like a quick skill building as part of this meeting um, each month as well. And so, I did a little digging around, and essentially, experts agree that there's essentially about 10 skills of care coordination, and they're these as follows: communicate effectively, develop family-centered partnerships, assess needs, develop individualized care plans, collaborate with others, support uh, patients and families with information and resources, and then track things like tests, referrals, outcomes, coach patients and families, support transitions, and then use technology to improve care. So I wanted to run just a quick poll and have you all weigh in on just two quick questions. Which skill do you feel like you use most frequently in your day-to-day work? And then the second question is, which skill would you like to build? And that'll give us some direction so we can, like I said, try to build in some of these essential skills of care coordination and into future meetings. So I'll give you a couple minutes to answer those two questions.
I accidentally submitted before scrolling down to
Oh, that's all right.
the next question. That's fine.
All right, we've had about half the people respond. So if the other half of you can jump on these two questions really quick, that'd be really helpful.
Athena, I did the same
Yeah.
thing.
Oh no.
Well, fortunately, one of these is not essential skills is reading instructions carefully. So,
Well,
There.
it's all right.
Yeah, can you reopen the poll?
I
Because
don't
I
know.
don't know if there's a way.
I don't think it unfortunately allows me to open it back up. We can have a conversation about this too, though.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and end the poll now. Looks like most people have answered. And so uh, as you can, it looks like the skills most frequently used are supporting families with information and resources, communicating effectively, um, and communicating effectively. So those are the top two. Great. And developing family partnerships, I'd say, comes in third. And then skills you'd like to build, it looks like our most highest rated ones were supporting transitions and then communicating effectively and coaching families. So that's great. So yeah, if anybody else wants to chime in with what you would have answered for that second one, that will give us some direction around this in the future. Or you can pop
Yeah.
it in the chat as well if you don't want to talk.
I think for me, it's always like supporting the patients with our families with real help, real guidance and resources. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Athena, and I'm looking at this kind of from a systems level, but I always look at that developing family-centered partnerships.
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah, that's great. How to do that, how to make them sustaining. That's
Dina,
great.
can sorry,
Yeah.
I wish, and I don't know that it was on here, but like, how do we track outcomes? Like, I love all of these things, but I
Yeah.
wish if somebody has a way of like looking at what we do that makes a difference. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
just my thoughts. How do we track outcomes?
That's great. There are some tools out there. You know, so I think that'd be a great thing to talk about in the future. Awesome. All right. Well, you can look forward to that being like kind of a new section of this meeting. We'll try to like have just like a brief skill building thing each meeting as well, so that we're all feel like we're improving our skills as care coordinators as well. Um, all right, so today's learning session is going to be about special education services. Our presenter today is Kaydee McMahon. She's a parent consultant and part of the statewide parent training and information project with the Utah Parent Center. So I'm going to turn the time over to her.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today. Um, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. You guys let me know if it pops up.
Yeah, I can see it.
You guys can see it? Okay, perfect. We'll throw it into slideshow. So I was asked to share about special education. And there were some questions in there about preschool as well. So I wanted to share this presentation about the transition from early childhood intervention services into preschool. And we're going to talk about getting into special education services, either way you look at it. And I'll note the differences between like the early young age until later on into life as well, so that you guys can understand how you can start and begin and become eligible for special education services. And if you guys have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to throw them in the chat. I would love to make sure I answer your questions. And then at the end, I will have like a question section as well, but don't be afraid to put them in as we go along. So I just want to introduce me a little bit. This is me and my daughter. This is Haley. She is 12 years old now, and she is my first child. I had her at 28 years old, and she has Down syndrome. And then I have two younger girls. So she has two little sisters without disabilities. She has been my learning for all of this, right? I also have a background. I graduated from Utah State University in early childhood special education. And at the time I had her, I was a special education preschool teacher. So I've been able to see both sides of special education as a parent and also as a teacher. So hopefully some of the things I share with you today will be helpful in understanding kind of how that looks on both sides. If you all would take just a moment, the Utah Parent Center, our presentations and all the things we do are free of charge. And that's because we reach out to get grants and things from people to share our services. And so for that, we need to turn in demographic information of the people that we speak to, so that they know who we're reaching and where. I'm also going to throw this into the chat if that would be easier, because I know sometimes I'm on these meetings on my phone, right? And it's like, oh, I can't take a picture at the same time. So give me just a sec to throw this into the chat as well. And if you would take a moment to fill that out, that would be very helpful. Okay, so hopefully it says to everyone. I've done it to individual people, so had to double check that. So yeah, if you'll just take a moment to fill that out as we go. So the three things I want to talk to you today about are the steps of transitioning, especially from that early childhood intervention program. And then eligibility. Now, eligibility for preschool is actually the same as special education from 3 to 22. So the eligibility is going to be the same no matter your age. And then we're going to look at a little bit of the differences between early intervention and preschool. I feel like a lot of parents get a lot of information from early intervention, and then it shifts and it looks a little different come school. So you guys are going to see both sides of it today, the early intervention and the public school system. So, oh, sorry, I forgot to take this slide out. I usually present to parents, so we're just going to skip this one. You guys aren't making this transition, so you shouldn't be concerned. But maybe think about questions you have about this transition into special education. So when it comes to preschool, you actually have a few options out there. The first is your public school district. which is going to be your special education services. More and more school districts are offering what we call a lottery preschool, where they accept a certain amount of children from the district on a lottery basis. And these are kids without disabilities, and this is your typical preschool classroom. Not all districts are doing that. Some districts simply have special ed preschool and no other type of preschool. Another preschool option are private or homeschool. So any school out there that could be your neighborhood school, like your neighbor does a homeschool preschool, or you do a homeschool as a parent does a homeschool preschool, or there are private preschools out there as well. Also, what falls into this lump is your childcare. Oftentimes, childcare will offer preschool and educational components, and so it can be considered a preschool as well. One thing to note here, charter schools. So charter schools are considered a public school. And as it currently stands, charter schools in Utah do not offer preschool special education services. Now, there might be charter schools out there who have like preschool that is for anyone, kind of like that lottery system in the districts, but they don't provide special education services. That all falls under your district. And then the last option for preschool is Head Start and Early Head Start, which is for families with low income. Now, when it comes to special education, and I'll talk about this a little later, sometimes districts, depending on the situation and depending on the specific family and child need, special education services can be provided by the district in Early Head Start or Head Start, based on the need of the families. And then what this looks like, older grades, right? Not talking preschool, but kindergarten and on. Really, you just have the first two options. Your school district, which is also going to include charter schools because they are considered public schools, and then your private or homeschool options. So there's 5 steps of transitioning from the early intervention program into special education. And we're going to go into each of these in a little more detail. But the first part is there will be planning that happens with the early intervention team. Then there's going to be a transition meeting with the school district. Then evaluation will happen to see if the child qualifies for special education services. Then if they do qualify, an individualized education family plan or an individualized education plan, IEP, is created. And then preschool services begin. The first step in this is the planning. So it does state all of early intervention and special education fall under the law of IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities, or the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Sorry, there's a ton of acronyms. I'm sure you guys have your own acronyms in your world, and here in the education world, there are tons as well. So IDEA does mandate that your early intervention team has to get together with the family no later than 90 days before the child's 3rd birthday to talk about this transition, to plan it, to let parents know what it looks like, what's going to happen, and to schedule a meeting with the district to have that transition meeting happen. So this shouldn't be something that parents are blindsided by. They should be getting help along the way. And their early intervention team is really going to be the one to start that process. So step 2 is the transition meeting. What is talked about at the transition meeting? They talk about preschool options, which we talked about today already. What options the parents could do if they choose to go public, if they want to go private, if they're in a Head Start situation, then they will talk about that at the transition meeting as well. Other transitions, again, that refers to the Head Starts. And then they're going to talk about potential eligibility. This meeting is not about eligibility for special education. It is simply about this is what eligibility is going to look like. This is what we're going to have to do. And we're going to talk about your child's possible potential. And based on that, the team at this meeting will decide if they want to refer the child for special education or if they choose not to. And then who's supposed to be at this meeting, the parents have to be there. If for some reason there's multiple attempts to contact parents and to set up this meeting and parents, just don't happen, then this meeting really doesn't happen. But they can hold it without the parents. But they have to have reasonable attempts to get the parents involved and there. And they do have to work with parent schedules. That's one thing a lot of people don't realize when it comes to school meetings, and this will be any special education meeting. The law does state that the school has to work with parent schedules. So if a parent can't do it during school hours, the team has to talk about alternatives. So that is something that needs to happen. The next person that needs to be there, EI is our acronym for early intervention. So your early intervention service coordinator, that's the one who manages the file and manages all the other services. That person needs to be there. And that should be the person talking to the parents 90 days before the child's birthday. And then the last person is the preschool coordinator, or it can be the local education agency, or LEA. Now, that's just a fancy word for the district or charter school, because we can't say just district. We now have charter schools, so local education agency. And so they also need to be in attendance. Oftentimes, your preschool coordinator and your LEA are the same person. Sometimes they are different. The specific person who fills that role is up to the district and is the district's choice. So let's talk a little bit for a second about what is special education specifically. What does it look like? The first part of special education is that it is specially designed instruction. Another acronym is SDI. Now, this is what it looks like for a student who has trouble accessing the regular curriculum. So the regular curriculum is either too fast-paced, or they don't have foundational skills with which to access the curriculum. And so they need their instruction changed from what everybody else is getting. Everybody else is getting a specific curriculum, whatever that school or district chooses to go with. And what we're seeing is that the student isn't able to access that, and they're not making progress as well as others. So we need to specially design the instruction, meaning it needs to be individualized and specific to that student. And that's where we get the IEP coming in. Special education is at no cost to parents. Early intervention services here in Utah are on a sliding fee scale. So depending on parent income, they may have to pay a certain amount of money each month for those services. But once you hit 3 to 22, all those services are free and of no cost to parents. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The next part that the law includes is that special education needs to meet the needs of the child in two areas, instruction and physical education. So we can't leave out the PE and the other big movement parts of school. They can't be students on special education or with disabilities can't be excluded from that. It needs to be included in their IEP and in their instruction so that they are not missing that as well. So next is evaluation. Now, this is the step that's going to look the same. Whether you're in early intervention or you get a diagnosis at 10, right? 10 years old, you're going to have a different lead up to this point. But at this point, it now looks the same. Evaluation has to be done for every child to see if they qualify for special education. And essentially, that is a medical model. So the typical students would score about, somewhere up here, and then your child with special needs would have to show a big enough gap. That gap has to be big enough. If the gap's not big enough, or they're on par with their peers, then they would not qualify for special education, no matter the diagnosis that they have. So the team has to decide what evaluations they're going to do. So that's one of the first parts of the process is the team, including the parent, will say, okay, these are my areas of concern. I'm concerned about their academics, I'm concerned about their motor and their movement, Maybe I'm concerned about their self-help skills. Whichever area of concern, the team has to look at and say, okay, yeah, we want to test that area and see if that child shows a delay in that area. The next important thing is for the parents to sign a consent to test. Now, no testing, standardized or otherwise, can happen without a parent's signature. So they will have to sign a form. It's usually called the evaluation consent form or parent consent. And they have to sign that. And on that, it usually says, what areas are we going to test? Are we going to test speech and language? Are we going to test cognitive ability? You got to check all those areas that you want tested. And then once the parent signs that test, the school has 45 school days. So we're not including weekends or holidays or days off of school. They have 45 school days to complete the testing, and then the team will get together and review the results. And as they review the results, they'll make the determination, okay, was there a significant delay in one or more areas, and do they qualify for special education? So let's jump into eligibility a little bit more in detail. We've talked about what we need to do to find out and to get to the steps to decide to do eligibility. Now, if you're not in preschool and this is happening older, you don't have to have these meetings to prep you up for this. Parents can request special education testing at any time, and they can request it multiple times. So if a child tests for eligibility but then is found not eligible, that doesn't mean they are never eligible in the future again. The parents can request testing again. Um, Usually, schools might say, oh, we have to wait 6 months or a year. That's usually due testing protocol. And some tests that if they're given too soon on a calendar year, invalidate the test. So parents can also ask, well, is there a different test that we can offer that would be valid? So really, it could go, I mean, you could test 6 months later or 3 months later. You would have to see and talk with the school and make sure that we're not invalidating any tests. But that can happen at any time. But in preschool, they kind of have a stream, or the early intervention to preschool, they have a streamlined way to get you there. So let's look at eligibility. Now, again, this is the same for everyone. The team has to ask 3 questions. The first question is about meeting criteria for one of the 13 disability categories. I'm going to dive into that one a little bit, so put a pin in that one for now. The next question we have to ask is, does the disability adversely affect the child's education performance? And that's the big question, is educational performance. Is this cognitive delay causing them to be behind in their schoolwork? Is their behavior in such a way that they can't be regulated in order to receive instruction, right? Is it affecting education? If it's not affecting education and maybe it's affecting another part of life, that's not necessarily on the school. It has to be affecting their educational life. And then the last question is, again, do they require that SDI, the specifically designed instruction? Is what the current curriculum doing not addressing their needs? And do we need to do special education and special designed instruction to help them? Now let's go back to the categories. So there's 13 different categories. I have them listed out here under IDEA for which a student can qualify for special education. Now, each of these have a set of criteria, and you can find these in the USBE, the Utah Board of Education. They have a manual, and I'll throw that link in here in a sec. The have specific things. There's certain things you have to tick off to say, yes, they qualify for this specific category. Now, some categories like autism and multiple disabilities and other health impairment, those ones do require a doctor's diagnosis as one of the criteria to qualify. All the others, you don't have to have a doctor's note or a diagnosis. it would just be performance based, essentially, is this is where they're supposed to be at in the curriculum, and this is where we're seeing them perform. So parents, and really the one thing I like to let everybody know is these categories do not drive services. They do not drive IEP goals. They are simply a reporting mechanism for IDEA and for districts to say, we're serving so many children who are deaf and blind. We're serving so many children who have specific learning disabilities. It really is for reporting numbers. This has nothing to do with services. Services are going to be individualized, but they need to hit the criteria. So really, you only talk about this at eligibility. It's we got to hit that criteria, and then we got to report, the school will report with their numbers of what that looks like. Now, one of the 13 categories, developmental delay, this one is often one that is used for preschoolers because when children are that young, sometimes we don't have that autism diagnosis or ADHD diagnosis. I mean, a lot of these diagnoses sometimes come later in life. And so we don't really know specifically. So developmental delay is kind of a catch-all category that's okay, we're going to say that there's delays in multiple areas, but we don't know exactly. We can't pinpoint it to a specific cause. Um, and this category can only be used until the child is 8 years old. Once they're 8 years old, you have to pick one of the other 13 or other 12 categories. So that's just an interesting piece to put up there that it's intricate, but honestly, you're only going to hear about this at eligibility. Okay, so the next part is to create the individualized education plan. And so if we say, yeah, the child qualifies, we're now going to work on the IEP. Now, the IEP is where everything is going to be individualized, hence the name. It's going to be very specific at what services the child needs. Do they need an occupational therapist, a speech and language therapist, or do they need orientation and mobility to help them access their environment? They're going to look at accessing curriculum as well as environment and as well as peers. You want to make sure that they have access to peers without disabilities as part of the IEP. And then the other last thing for preschool is once your child turns 3 years old, they start preschool services. So if your child has, or if the child has a birthday in November, they'll start on their third birthday in preschool. Once the IEP and all that transition meeting has been held, they'll just wait for the third birthday to roll around and they will start. If they third birthday is in March, they start preschool in March. So preschool students are starting all year round based on their birthday. Now, if they have a summer birthday, the team will decide, okay, when are we going to begin? Are we going to begin in fall? Are we going to do some services early on in the spring? Are we going to need to do something over the summer? Again, very individualized what that student specifically needs. But typically, third birthday is when services will begin at preschool. So I want to chat a little bit about the differences between early intervention and preschool and special education services. And this might also help you as you're interacting with parents to understand kind of why the education system will say, oh, yeah, we can do that, or no, we can't do that. Because it really is based on the laws that govern them. And the law is different for early intervention versus preschool. So in IDEA, you have B. Part B is considered your 3 through 22, and Part C is the early intervention. And then D is just management and funds and things. So it has separate parts within the law that they both operate under. Okay, so this is just a table to help understand what's a little bit different. And I'm going to delve in a little bit more to help you guys understand too a little bit more of the specifics of special education. So we've already mentioned the ages. Early intervention starts birth to 3. So any time between there, you can start early intervention services, and those do come to the home, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Then preschool is ages 3 to 5, but special education here in Utah is 3 to 22. So even after high school, like if they've met senior year and they haven't graduated, then the student can continue to receive special education services. So essentially, you can say special education services are good from 3 to graduation or 22. If you graduate and you have special needs, whether it be an alternate diploma or a regular diploma, then you stop education service, special education services at that time. Um, then the other difference between the two is who provides services. So early intervention is coordinated services for multiple agencies. And you have Baby Watch, who is, we'll talk about that as the lead agency. And then you have all the individual early intervention programs. But then those early intervention programs can partner with community groups. They could have Head Start. Early Head Start often a big partner. Another could be if they want to have OT, PT, any of those therapies could also be from the community as well. When it comes to the district and the LEAs, I'll include charter schools in this as well. The special education and related services come from the LEA, the district or the charter. Um, and sometimes, again, in more rural areas, we will see districts contract with a third party. Like, let's say they don't have a behavior specialist down in Blanding, Utah, so they might go with a third party, but that's still considered a district hire. Next is the focus. There's a little bit of a focus between early intervention and preschool services and really all of education. And this is where a lot of parents, I think, have a hard time because early intervention is very family centered. It's very, what are your family priorities? What does your family need help with? Like, what skills does your child need built so that your family can engage in the community? How can we help your child, attend church or go to the theater or things like that? How can we help the family in your needs and your priorities? And it's very like whole child. It's not just education, it's their whole world. But then once we hit school, preschool, and special education, it becomes student-centered and very much education-centered. How does this affect the child's progress at school? How does this affect the child's learning? And we kind of drop off and lose all of that. How do we help the family and the community, right? It's more how do we help the student? And so that's a hard shift for parents. And it's also a hard thing when parents go to a school and say, hey, we're having this problem out in the community. What can you do to help? In all honesty, the schools can come back and say, well, that's not our scope. So they don't have to help you write goals um, to go to the rec center or different things like that. Or I mean, my girl, my Haley is fearless when it comes to water. And so I had a huge safety concern with her of learning to swim, right? But that's not going to fall under the purview of the school. Okay. That's not helping her access her education. It's a huge concern for me as a parent because we have a stream in our backyard and we just don't like, she seriously was fearless, you guys. She didn't know how to swim, but she would still just jump in the water. And I'm like, you are crazy, kid. Like, no fear. So, like, that was a concern for me as a family, but the school's not required to address that. I hope that makes sense. And that can be tricky for families. Um, in early intervention, again, individualized family service plan. How can we help the family? Sometimes some of the goals are for the parent. Learning goals for the parent, helping them understand milestones and how to meet milestones, ideas of how to incorporate learning within everyday routines. And when you hit the individualized education plan, it's all about how do we access that curriculum? How do we access that grade level information, or what foundational skills do we need to get to that grade level? So, very different focus and different plans as a result. Now, service and delivery and placement. This is also a very big question with parents. In early intervention, they have what's called the natural environment, meaning where the child learns, where the child plays, where the child lives, right, is essentially where they're going to get services. So early intervention services happen in the home very often. They could also happen at a daycare facility if that's where the child spends a lot of their time. And so it's very flexible in that way. When it comes to special education, they have what's called the least restrictive environment, or LRE. Now, again, an education setting, number one. But they're focused now, least restrictive. This is a very confusing term for parents and professionals as well, because what one person might view as restrictive is going to be very different for someone else. And so, least restrictive environment is individualized. And essentially, it means the distance from your peers. So your peers without disabilities are here, and here's the child with disabilities. Are we in the same classroom? Do we have to do pull-outs and come back in? Do we have to be out and have push in to the classroom for certain amounts of time? Like, is there learning happening in the general education classroom? And if not, can we put supports there? And if those supports in the classroom don't work, do we have to pull them out and do like a special class somewhere else? Or sometimes even a special school. Now, for one student, I mean, it would be very restrictive for them to be in a special class away from their peers because the accommodations and modifications in the classroom weren't great. I don't need that. But another student, maybe we've got some very destructive behaviors or some very concerning behaviors that could hurt them or their peers. They might need to be out in a different spot to learn those foundational skills with a timeline to get back into the class with their peers. So you can't say the least restrictive environment is the same for everyone. It has to be very individualized based on student disability and needs. Next in our graph, so we have parent and family involvement. So this is going to change as well. In early intervention, the parents are very active partners. They are the ones pretty much providing the services. The service therapies and different people will come into the home, give the parents tips, but the parents are the ones that do it on a daily basis with the child. So, for example, my daughter, when she was in early intervention services, she was late walking and crawling and all that stuff. So we had a physical therapist come in, show us how to prompt and put her legs to prompt her to roll over when she was really young. And so we would put her in the position and kind of, and then we were the ones who did that intervention for her to try to help her until she got it. And then he taught us the next move. And then, we moved on. When it comes to education, it's a very different role from the parent. Instead of being coached and then giving the intervention, parents are simply giving input and consent for the school to then do the interventions. Now, the parent has to be part of that decision making. They cannot be left out of that decision making. I mentioned before, if the school has tried and tried and tried to set up a meeting with parents and, no show after no show, they can, after they show a reasonable amount of attempts to include parents, which nowadays is a lot easier because virtually you can always, that counts. You can include them virtually. But if they still can't get it, then a team can hold an IEP without a parent. But again, that has to be very documented. So, because parents really do have the right to be part of the decision-making process. Next, we talked about eligibility quite a bit for preschool. I want to dive a little bit more into eligibility for early intervention services. So early intervention services, you have to show that there's a developmental delay, which means they're not meeting their milestones in one or more areas. So maybe they're not speaking in time. When they should be having so many words, they don't have that many words yet. It could be, they should be crawling by now, but they're not crawling. They should be feeding themselves, but they're not feeding themselves, right? So they're not hitting those milestones in multiple areas, or they have a diagnosis that could very likely lead to a developmental delay. So my daughter, having Down syndrome, her diagnosis automatically qualified her for special or for early intervention services. She simply had to have that diagnosis because it is known that Down syndrome can often result in a delay. Now, when it comes to, like we mentioned before, in special education, you could have Down syndrome but still not qualify because maybe you're more high functioning and you're closer to your peers than not. So that is one thing to also remember, that it is a lot more children will qualify for early intervention than will qualify for special education. And not everyone who qualifies for early intervention will qualify for special education. Um, Next is the administration. Who administers these programs? Here in Utah, it's Baby Watch. They are our statewide agency, and then they have individual programs underneath it. The special education is driven by the school district or LEA and are supervised by the Utah State Board of Education. Then cost, again, we talked about this, a sliding fee schedule and no cost. Now, the reason that school is free is because we have the free and appropriate public education or FAPE. So every child, even if they have a disability, even if they have behaviors that are dangerous and hurting other people, the district is still responsible, or the LEA is still responsible to provide special education services. Now the team decides where that happens, right? We've already talked about placement. Maybe they're not in the class with other peers. Maybe they're at a different facility, but the school has to provide services no matter what, no matter where the child is. So sometimes if a child has a lot of medical needs, they could offer services in a hospital or an institution. Or maybe they're just medically fragile and they can't be around lots of people, so they can't go to the school, and the school can offer it at home in that instance. But what it comes down to is that the school has to provide a public education for every child, no matter their delay or their disability or their need. And the school has to meet that child where they need to be met. And then we talked about the law. Part C is early intervention, and Part B, don't ask me why it goes backwards. I feel like early intervention should be first and then, but that's just how they have it. So that is my main rundown. I feel like I've been chatting at you guys a ton. I wanted to see if there were any questions. If there's anything I didn't address today that you were like, oh, this is something I had a question about, please throw it in the chat. And then after we have questions, I do have a couple more slides of just some programs that I want to make you aware of at the Utah Parent Center. So is there any questions? You can also unmute too if you want to do that as well. Okay, and I'm going to give you guys some wait time, and I'm going to pull up that link for you for the Utah State Board of Education so that you can see the manual. Okay, so I just put a link in the chat. This is the special education manual put out by the Utah School Board of Education. And we talked about that eligibility requirement that lists those 13 categories and what criteria has to be met there. Okay. No questions. You guys have no questions about special education? I got them all. That's okay.
Katie, this is Eric with DHHS. I apologize, my camera just isn't working on this platform this morning. But I know Utah Parent Center, helps with IEPs and that sort of parental help with going into those IEP meetings. How often are those services requested? And I guess what I'm looking at is how often are parents going in and feeling like maybe the school is not understanding or is not willing to try to comply with what they need to do? Or is it quite often a case of parents really don't understand what type of accommodations need to be provided for their child? And quite often, maybe they're making demands that are not really considered least restrictive environment or that sort of a thing. My ex-wife is an elementary school principal, so I know there's a process the district has to go through for some of that. But I mean, I guess what I'm looking at is how often are parents kind of maybe going in with false expectations, or the school is trying to bulldoze sometimes what parents really should be able to get for their child.
Really, really good questions. It's tricky to answer as kind of all of the like a blanket answer. I get calls from parents who just don't understand what's going on, who just don't understand the acronym SOUP that we have, right? The alphabet soup, that don't understand what their rights are. And so oftentimes I'm explaining to parents what you have a right to do, what you have a right to ask for. Sometimes it's a breakdown in communication. The parents are trying to request something, but the school, there's actually not, the school's not necessarily denying it, but there's just this breakdown in communication and they don't really know what each other want. That I would say is what happens most in my daily consultations is it's really that breakdown of communication. And we as parents and people, like if we don't have an answer, right, our brain plays this funny thing where if we have holes in the story, we fill it with worst case scenario, right? We go to this is the absolute worst thing that's happening. And that happens a lot with parents. And so a lot of what I do is bridging that communication gap, helping parents learn to convey their concerns and requests in a way that can be understood. Um, there are times when districts really are, pushing back, and we help parents to make the choice. You can continue to push back. You can push for your rights. You have these options here, or you can wait and see, or you can, do what you want to do. Um, we obviously can't tell parents what to do. We can only inform them of their options and then let them choose. Um, but I would say the biggest issue that we have that we see most frequently is that breakdown of communication. The school simply doesn't understand what the parent's asking for, and the parent is playing that game of worst case scenario and filling in, oh, this, the worst things are happening. Um, but we do see all sorts of stuff. And we do have districts where I mean, it can offer parents, there's a state complaint route, there's due process, and there are parents that we help through due process, which is a formal dispute with the district. So we see it all, but really, it's honestly, I think it's mostly that breakdown of communication. And so if you're working with parents or schools, anything you can do to help parents understand good communication practices or the schools, being very specific and stating in writing. That's one of the things I find myself saying this every day. Did you ask the school in writing? Did you put it in an email? Um, a lot of parent, and one thing I will, and this is kind of a side note, a lot of schools are now using text ways to do it as well. However, those can be deleted. So I would stick with email. But yeah, I mean, really that communication, are you communicating in writing what you want? And that usually fixes the problem right there, is the communication in writing. So very, very good question. Did I answer all of that?
You know what? I probably asked a really loaded question, so I think you did fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. And that, I mean, it really is a good question. What do we deal with every day, right? Is a lot of that. And it really is a lot. And that's what my job is. So if you have parents that you run into that are having conflicts with schools or are not under or just don't even know the process, don't understand it. That's what I'm here for. I am here. My role is to teach parents to be advocates for themselves. We do attend IEP meetings. It's different criteria for different things, but we can help and be there. But my role at an IEP meeting is not to request anything, is not to demand anything. It is simply to make sure the parents' concerns are heard and that they understand. And that's really my job, to make sure parents are heard and that they understand. So if they're having troubles with that, send them our way. We love to help anyone we can. Um, I want to go. I've only got like 3 minutes left. If you have more questions, I'll throw my email in the chat. Please reach out to me. But I wanted to let you know of some programs that we have out that you can refer parents to. This one here is a parent support group. It's parents of kids with disabilities who've gotten a fairly new diagnosis. Now, we've had parents who, like, this is their newborn, and we also have parents, hey, this is my teenager, and we finally got a diagnosis. But it's really just a support group for parents to come together, talk about the ups and downs of receiving a diagnosis and special education. So this is a really exciting program that's brand new, and we're excited to be offering it. We do have one coming up in 6 days. So if you have parents that you know of, send this their way. We have all sorts of events. You can reach it at our utahparentcenter.org and click on our events. We have workshops. So this workshop that I gave to you, I can give again to anybody. People can request workshop for us, but we also have scheduled ones that happen every once in a while. We have Wise Wednesdays that happen every Wednesday or every third Wednesday, and they vary from different topics, IEPs, 504s. And then we also have Transition University, which is focused on helping students who are 14 and older transitioning into adulthood. Okay, I see a raised hand. Carrie, go ahead. Carrie
Yeah, I was
Martinez.
just going to ask you if you could share the links to those classes because, and also Utah Parent Center website's acting kind of strange right now.
Is it?
Um, so like I've been trying to pop up links and they're not opening. So I don't
It's not.
know, will you be sharing it in an email with, will
So
Athena be sending it out in an email?
yeah, so what I'll do is I'll send Athena my slides so that you can have those as well. And I will include some links in there. We are in the process of, we do have someone working on our website. It was very dated. So it has been up and down recently because of updates. So try again in a couple hours. It might work. Um, but yes, so I will send those out, but it's really the third Wednesday of every month from 7 to 8. And our TU is the second, yeah, the second Tuesday of every month, 7 to 8. But we have all sorts. So going to our event page, this is a snapshot from our calendar. We do have a calendar on the webpage if you find our events, and you can find all registration and stuff from there. All of our classes and things are free. Um, and we just do registration to help with know how many people to plan for. So website is usually the best. Oh, thank you. Oh, Amy, yes, Amy works with us quite a bit. Thank you, Amy. um, she got the next step support session in there for you in the chat, which is a really good one. The other thing I wanted really quick, I know I'm out of time. We have a sibling support group. So we have sib shops is what we call them. And we have an elementary age and a teenage age. They meet once a month. And it's just navigating life as a sibling, right? That's a very different life experience, the ups and downs of that. We also have an adult Facebook group, and we have a care notebook that we've created to help shift from parents taking care of a child to a sibling taking care of a child, which is really awesome. Again, all of this is on our website when it's up and running. Um, Lastly, if you get, again, we are free service. So if you would like to volunteer or donate, we would love that as well. And then I am going to quickly throw in another um, survey real quick. This is just tell me how I did and be honest. Let me know if it was good or bad or ugly, because I want to make sure that this was helpful and that we hit the topics that you wanted to hear. Sorry, I accidentally closed that window, so let me pull it back up. And I will drop that in the chat. If you would just take a moment to fill that out. Again, super helpful. It's just a Google form. And then I did not mention, we also have other projects under the Utah Parent Center. We have Utah Family Voices, which might border over more with you all, which helps families with DSPD, SSI, any medical or health questions. There's a whole team at the Utah Parent Center that addresses that. And we also started, we've been working with um, the high fidelity wraparound. We've also become a member of that as well. So hopefully we have someone somewhere with expertise that will help the families that you run into. So thank you again for having me. It's been great being here.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. I am just gonna close out the meeting for Athena. So our next meeting will be September 17th, and we'll be talking about therapy modalities beyond ABA. And if you'd like to stay connected with us, this is the email for our listserv. And if you don't think you're on the listserv, you can message me or Athena, and we can get you added to there. And then we also have our UCCCN Facebook group. And Athena will be sending out a recap of the meeting with slides and links and everything sometime tomorrow or the next day. So if there's nothing else anybody wants to share, we will see you on September 17th.